What's going on, everyone? Welcome back for episode 5 of the Rockabilly build. And as you can see, I've got it set as a roller, but in this video, we're gonna go over kind of what I've set this thing up with currently, some of the things that you may run into, the little details that you need to pay attention to while assembling it to a roller. And then I'm also going to be starting on the install of some of the other pieces that tie in with the functions and things like that before we get into the full detail of the interior. So I've got some of the parts printing on the H2D right now, but let's get into some of the details of the final assembly. So as I mentioned previously, I'm setting this one up with portals to be a trail rig. Since that won't fit the Pro Mod rule set, I'm not concerning myself with that side as much. Now I've built the axles. I did do aluminum housings and knuckles, some brass weight up front. The third member, just a fully built set of axles. Obviously that was just a personal preference. It's not needed. You do need to make sure that you're running the BTA servo kit. That is important. And also when you put your transmission together, you need to make sure that you're running a stubby kit. That's for the clearance that you need with the BTA and all of that. That is important. I've got a Holmes Hobbies 540M 1800 kV revolver in there. And I built this off of a VRD carbon, so it does have the lightweight machined gears inside. It's also made to run a VFD dig on the back. There's a mount that goes with that. You don't have to run a VFD dig if you do not want to, but it's sure nice to have it, whether it's competition or just for trail. I really like having the dig. One thing, when installing a dig on a VRD skid plate, you see those spacers there. They're about a 3mm spacer. You need to do that so that the dig clears the back of the skid plate. Since the VRD platform was based around like SORCA Class 2 rules, which did not allow dig, it wasn't made with that clearance in mind, just because of like, it just helps keep the transmission as low as possible. So I had to raise it up just a little bit, no big deal with that. I am running the VRD carbon shocks, which are a 90mm shock. I do have I put the caps and collars on in red accent colors. That's kind of the color that I'll be going with a number of these things. They come with the hard anodized body, so you will see that that is there already. And I'm running the stock shock shafts as well as the stock springs. So when this thing sits, it will touch the servo right before full compression. You can still see that there's still a few millimeters there. So it will touch the servo. I'm not overly worried about that, but the flex is good. Now, I may add a 1mm spacer between the pivot ball and the shock mount. That is just for the ultimate clearance. It clears fine right now, but when it goes all the way up on one side, it does get really close or is touching right there. So 1mm spacer between those two should be fine. It depends on what shocks you're running. When I do like the Pro Mod build, I run pricey custom shocks, which work really well. And I do have another set of those in case I want to go that route, but I'm not, at this point, I don't think that I'm going to. So the other thing is the actual shock mounts. Those are on the laser cut parts tree. And you can see that those bolt to the chassis right there on the back side of the mount. And then the rear ones mount to their towers in those positions. Now, I don't have these painted or anything like that. I may actually do some milled aluminum versions of these just for fun, like I did on the other version, the other Rockabilly. But that's not something that's, imperative to this design or the setup at all. It'd probably be the exact same thing, just with a little bit of different look. Once you cut the shock mounts out from the parts tree, this hole and this hole, plus this outside and this outside one, those all need to get tapped to M3, as that's where the shocks mount. These other holes, all the rest of them on there, those can get drilled through to an 1/8 inch. So it clears a 3mm screw. Right now I have the rear battery box printing with the lid in the back, and then that is the dig servo mount. I'm printing that out of ABS glass fiber in gray, and those will be the next pieces that I get put in. Front engine is a lot of pieces, so I'll also start getting those printed. Bolting the axles and suspension, everything into this car is pretty straightforward. You use the screws right from the VRD kit everything mounts right up. The only area you need to pay attention to is the driver's side front upper link. And you can see there that the screw needs to go in from the inside with the nut on the outside so that everything clears the drive shaft. That is the only area that things are, you know, need some special attention. Everything else just mounts right up. I did not like how the gray looked against the cage color, so I decided not to use that. The fuel cell kind of drops in from the back and slides forward. And once it is in place, the shock tab screws will go into those pockets as well. And then you can also attach it through the bottom with a couple of screws. If you want, it'll all suck up against there. And then through the side, it will also line up with these uprights. Now, you can get that screwed in from one side. On this side, you'll add the dig servo mount as well. It goes on the outside of the upright. That servo mount is made for the Raw 100 from Reefs. It's kind of a mid-size servo, but I really like using it, so that's what I designed that mount around. When installing your dig servo, align the servo horn in this orientation, so it's with the body of the servo and right in line. That will give you about the appropriate amount of throw that you need for the dig servo. I am using a 24mm servo horn. It mounts in the mount in this configuration with the standoffs to the face side of the servo itself. And then it will sit in the chassis in this orientation with the servo output towards the top side. And then we'll just secure it with the screws on the back side of the mount. Before assembling too much of the interior, we do need to put in the scale engine. So the first step is to take the intake and bolt it to the block with the two M3 screws that go in from the bottom there. So with these two pieces attached, we need to fit it over top of the motor plate. And to do that, it's kind of easiest to have the transmission a little bit loose so you can flex this down enough, and then you can get that to pop over. Once you get the back over the motor plate, you can kind of get it to pop down. So now with that first piece over top of the motor plate, it's not going anywhere, so we can start the assembly of the next pieces. This will be a little out of phase, but it is good to put the intake in place over top of the shock tower brace and tied into the intake manifold there before you get too far in. However, if you do decide to do it later, you can snap it in. You just kind of move things around and give it a little force. You have the cylinder heads, which can go on next. There's a left and a right. This is the driver's side. And these will attach with one M3 screw right through the top side of the cylinder head. The engine will get secured in place with two screws that are going to go up from under the motor plate and then into the bosses on the cylinder heads. But we're going to finish assembling everything without that done, just because it kind of gives us that freedom to move it around to get clearance for any of the hardware that you plan to use. The valve covers here, they're made to use just standard 164 hardware, which is like what you find in the beadlock rings of a Vanquish wheel, or I picked up scale hardware, so that's what I'm going to put. The two outside ones just thread into the cover itself. The center one is what actually holds it onto the block. So you've got a threaded hole there. This is just a clearance hole, so if there's any thread sticking out of the valve cover, it doesn't interfere. There is left and right sides. You can see that little indent there. Make sure you match that up. So this will be the other side. With the valve covers on each side, now we can install the oil pan. So this is just going to kind of fit up right on the bottom side there, and you're going to attach it with 5 pieces of hardware. There's also a drain plug that you can put an extra piece of hardware in if you want to. You can get the lower pulley installed at any point. To finish up the engine, you do have the air filter here. This is one piece. I 3D printed it in 2 colors. Just did a change color by height on the bamboo, and did like a gray or matte gray and then a red to kind of look like the filter element. And it screws in with 1 screw from the end into that intake there. Now you do also have the exhaust, which you can see it in there. And the headers are a little difficult to print, but installation is not that bad. There's one screw on each side. You can see the one tucked in there on the driver's side, right in the back side of the header. And in the passenger side, it's a little bit harder to see as it's here installed already, but it's that dark circle right below that intake runner there. Now, there's also a crossover tube that will go between them, and it screws in from the driver's side. You can see the one piece of hardware right there. It is a good idea to put a little bit of CA glue where those things mount from the crossover tube to the header itself, just to keep it from rotating. Right now mine's not glued and you can see it rotates out of the way. So I'm gonna put a little bit of CA glue in there just to keep things where they're supposed to be. Now you can see I've already started to install some of the inner fenders as well. These are in the member created side, and this is from Pele. He did these inner fenders, and I've also 3D printed the front inner fenders as well, but I haven't installed those yet. He's got two different versions for the passenger side one that has this cool little cutout for the air filter, so you'll be able to kind of see it through that inner fender. I thought that was just a cool detail, so that's the one that I chose. The driver's side is just a nice little filler panel, and again, we'll get the front ones installed also. So that's dropped in. You'll also see this piece right there in the front. Now that is for mounting a set of headlights. That gives you a single screw mount, and I've got a set of headlights that I bought on Amazon that fit in here well, that mimic the ones used on the full-size Rockabilly. So that's the ones that I'll be using, and I'll include a link to those. After that, we can then start to work on the interior side of things. We've got the dig servo already installed, and you can see here one of the seat mounts. So the seats mount with a couple of screws, and it gives you a base. Now I've already printed the seats as well. They screw in with a couple of M2 pieces of hardware through there and into that seat base. Exact same situation on the other side. There is also another interior option also from Pele, the same person who made these, as well as some like modified interior pieces from Brandon, who made like some multicolor versions of the seats, so you can have like some accents where these seatbelt things are, as well as some accents for the actual dash itself. Some pretty cool parts. Again, you'll find some of those options in the member created, but the other version of the interior that Pele has, that'll be a separate download, and I'll get that on the site here as soon as I can. He did send me an updated version here recently, and I'll get that added. But that, like I said, that'll be a separate download on the website, and it's made to use a larger, like eliminates this side of the seat, and you can put like a larger battery in here if you want to. I did print his setup, and I test fitted in there. It fit well. I prefer the look of the two-seat interior, so I'm going to stay with that. If you do go with this, it's got a cap that goes on this side, and it has a completely different, or it's still like a derivative of the original dash, but it's a little bit of a different orientation to kind of make all of the clearances work around that new setup. So again, you'll be able to find this. It also includes a different version of the rear fuel cell, but just know that there is a lot of options of things that you could do when installing the interior. I'm going to go with the standard, the base version, whatever you want to call it, because I do like the two-seat interior. There are floor pans that go in as well on each side. I'm not going to install those until I have my wiring more sorted out. You may need to take these seats in and out a number of times to get your wiring sorted and tucked in where it needs to be. So something worth thinking about. We're not going to dive into the wiring at all yet in this video. So this is just kind of getting this base start. When installing the dash, it installs with the 3 screws across the top side there. I do find it best to not screw in the top cap of the VFD transmission, just because of how everything kind of clicks into place, especially if you already have the skid plate and everything in there. If you leave the skid out, then you don't have to worry about it, but that's not the way that I built it this time or the time before. So if I just don't install my shifters, then it's easier to install the dash. I have printed all of my interior pieces, the dash, the seats, the mounts, fuel cell, all that stuff out of ABS glass fiber in black, and it prints really well, gives it a nice finish, and it'll hold up to being outside. So That's the filament that I've chosen for this. When we get to the wiring phase, you're going to want to have these XT60 plugs available that have the mounting holes on them. And these use a 2.5 millimeter screw. Before I mount it up though, I do clip off these extensions that are on each side. You can see it fits nicely right in there. You'll have 2 screws to hold it in place, and that allows you to plug the battery in and out without having to grab both sides of the connector. It's really handy, something I try to use on a number of builds. I'll put a link to these down in the description as well. This is the rear fuel cell cover, and when you print this, I do suggest printing it on edge like this, because the strength of the layer lines will work with this flexible latch, because that's what actually holds the door closed. Now on the back side, there's a hole, which you can see a pin sticking out here. Now that is a set pin like you would use to attach a drive shaft. So you're actually going to screw it in backwards. You'll use like a set of needle nose pliers to do that, and you'll leave roughly 3 millimeters sticking out of the pin side. That is what keys in with this little hole here on the actual fuel cell itself. So you just kind of use it to get it aligned and retained. And once it's in there, it'll kind of snap down, and the floor is what will actually retain this latch. Now, it may take a little bit of sanding to just make sure that this thing clips in and stays in place, but that's how this is held in place, and that latch works pretty well. Something that's worked reliably on my other one. This is actually the lid from my original Rockabilly. But that's going to do it for this update on the Rockabilly. We're getting closer to this thing being like an actual car. There's just the details left and a lot of wiring, and there's a lot of work to get all of the wiring tucked in on this thing. I may do some little tweaks or changes to this one as I go to continue making it, you know, the trail rig that I'm after rather than the Rockabilly that I built for the Pro Mod competition. But that's the fun part about this. Once you're into a custom build, this thing has all of the parts to get it completed for you, so you don't have to do anything. But if you want to make it your own, there's lots of opportunities to do that, and I like to kind of work on that mindset as we go. We have body panel stuff to work out, again, a lot of wiring to do, but you know, getting the motor in there, working on some of those details, getting the interior initial pieces put in place so you can start understanding how everything's going to work together, because you want to have that stuff in there before you start wiring, just because you want to make sure that you don't start to put something in the way of something else, and that can happen pretty easily. But if you're enjoying the Rockabilly series, make sure and leave a comment down below. Subscribe if you're not already, notification bell. I'll put links to as many of the things that I can remember out of this video as possible, but if there's anything you'd like to see in particular, drop that down in the comments below as well, and I'll make sure to get that information added to the description and make sure I tag you so that you can see that it's there. But that's going to do it for this video on the Rockabilly. Probably 1 or 2 more videos before this thing is finished, but hopefully we can keep up on this kind of weekly series. I will be traveling a little bit, so it may be hopefully I'm on track for the next week, but I'll do my best. Appreciate you guys for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're not already. Members side of things is available also, in case you'd like to see these videos as soon as I get them finished. But thanks again for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.